Let's talk about one of the most important things if you are looking to start or run a sports card business, which is liquidity. Now, I hear all the time from new sellers, old sellers, etc., talking about how they have so much inventory, but it is just stagnant. It sits on eBay, it sits at card shows, it does not sell. And that's a big problem. And the biggest reason I think that this normally happens is liquidity issues. Now, liquidity in general is basically how likely is a card to sell. And there are a lot of factors that go into thinking about liquidity, but I think that it's one of, if not the most important factors when I think about buying a card. Now, I'm going to give you guys a breakdown on liquidity, why it matters, some of the things that go into it, etc. I've got a whole little slideshow that I built. I know you guys love those, so let's get to that. So, liquidity, why does it matter? What's the importance with buying cards that are more liquid than others? When you are buying cards for your business, the amount of time that it takes you to sell that card, I would argue, is the most important factor that I consider when I'm buying cards. I care more about liquidity than I do getting a better percentage. I would rather pay 80 to 85% on a card that is super liquid, I know is going to sell within a week for me, versus paying 65 to 70% on a card that is more than likely just going to sit on eBay for months and months, if not years. The longer that you hold a card, the greater the chance there is for there to be market volatility and that negatively impact you. Let's be honest, with how many cards exist nowadays, it is more likely that your card is going to go down in value than it is to go up in value. Now, obviously, that is not the case for every single card. That's not the case every scenario. But most situations, a card is more likely to go down as hype for that set starts to die down, as interest in that player starts to move on, unless that player is consistently staying at the top of the hype cycle and the demand cycle. Most likely the value on that card is going to go down, period, even if they continue to play well. Being too inventory heavy also limits you and your business. The saying cash is king exists for a reason, and that is that everybody would prefer money. Now, I know if you are using the hobby to fund the hobby, at the end of the day, you are hopefully going to use those funds to go buy PC cards. But when we're talking about inventory and liquidity, you would rather have PC cards than inventory that is not selling, than inventory that is not guys that you actually collect. You would rather have cash over those guys too, because then you could go buy PC cards. So you really want to make sure that you are staying and thinking about liquidity all the time. Now, for the sake of this video, we're going to look at some examples of players and apply these players to the components of liquidity that we're going to talk about. These players are Shohei Ohtani, Salvador Perez, Jose Ramirez, Mookie Betts, and Colton Cowser. Why did I pick these players? Well, I think that they're a good mix and variety of superstar players, of guys who are well-liked on their team, who have upside, who are playing well, etc. You know, not picking the top rookie in an Ellie and a Paul Skeens, taking the top guy in a Shohei Ohtani, picking some superstar players like Jose Ramirez and Mookie Betts, some guys who are very well regarded on their team and very well collected in Salvador Perez. I thought that it was a good mixture. Obviously, looking at a lot of different players, it's fun to see who's more liquid than the other. The first factor in liquidity that we want to think about is relevancy. How relevant is this player? And that goes for the collecting landscape. In all reality, the collecting landscape is related to the larger sports landscape. Relevancy is influenced by things such as career length. Are they brand new on the scene, which can be good or bad? Are they somebody who has been playing for a super long time and therefore has maybe a cult following, has a larger collector base? What about their current hype? If they're not somebody who has a really long career, are they really hyped up right now? Are they maybe going to win Rookie of the Year? Are they somebody who's going to break out in their second year, etc.? What is their current place in the larger MLB landscape? Are they the best player on their team? Is their team competitive? How likable is this player? It's another huge factor. You have guys like Manny Machado, who is a fantastic baseball player, more than likely a Hall of Famer, but his market is not that great because he's not a likable player in many people's eyes. So, to these examples, what I did here is I pulled up how many Instagram followers these players have when thinking about our relevancy. I figured it was a good kind of baseline metric to think about how relevant is this player. So Shohei Ohtani, casual 8.8 million followers. Salvador Perez, 1 million followers. Honestly, that was more than I expected, but Salvador Perez is somebody who's had that long career length, so he is a little bit more relevant from that perspective. Jose Ramirez, not as long of a career as Salvador Perez, but I think he's a significantly better player than Salvador Perez. Plays in a similar market size, yet way less followers. Mookie Betts, 1.7. That about tracks. Colton Cowser, 41.5 thousand. Next thing, volume. How many of this card's players are on the market? What is the volume that this player has? This is influenced by things such as how many years have they had cards? A guy like Colton Cowser, he's only had 2024 Topps product. He's not somebody who has been in sets for years, if not decades. How likely are sellers to list their cards? That's a big thing, because if they're a player who they're not going to sell, if they're somebody who is not very liquid, well, it's more likely that there's going to be less volume of their cards available because people aren't going to take the time to list them because they don't think it's going to sell. How frequently does Topps include players in these sets? So there are sets like Series 1, Series 2, Update that have huge checklists. Topps flagship, which is Series 1 and Series 2 combined, that's a 700 plus player checklist normally. So you're probably going to get a card in there if you're on a major league roster. But set like Topps Cosmic, that only has 200 cards in it. Topps Chrome Black, I think, is 100 cards a lot of times. So different sets have different numbers of players. And unless you're the top tier or a pretty good rookie, you're probably not going to be in the set. So that also impacts your volume. Back to our examples here. So Shohei Ohtani right now on eBay has 220 plus thousand listings of his cards. Salvador Perez, 38,000. Way smaller. Jose Ramirez, 55,000. So despite having a smaller relevancy from a Instagram follower perspective, he has more volume. Mookie Betts, 100,000. And Colton Cowser, 31,000. Now compare that, Colton Cowser at 31,000 versus Salvador Perez at 38,000. Perez has existed and been in the league for, a decade, more than that? Top player, won a World Series, very, very, very well liked in Kansas City. Colton Cowser wasn't even Rookie of the Year, not even, one of the best young players on his team, but 31,000 cards on eBay. Value. Now, value is how much are people willing to spend on this player? There's a couple of different ways that we can look at this, but we're going to talk about it in general. How much are people willing to spend? And that goes on the high end as well as the low end. This is influenced by things such as hype. We in the hobby love hype. How much upside does this player bring? What could be? What is their likelihood of making the Hall of Fame? And the reason that this is important is because what is the likelihood of them maintaining relevance? If a player doesn't make the Hall of Fame, it's very difficult for them to maintain market relevance. What is the player's current performance? If they're playing well right now, their values are going to be higher. If they're playing poorly, their values are probably going to be low. Is their team relevant? When a team makes the playoffs, when a team is doing well, people are thinking about them more, that team is playing on national television more. It's more in the psyche of the average sports fan and the average collector. So for value here, I wanted to try and find total sales volume. I couldn't, unfortunately. Card Ladder only lists some players. So what I did is I did the highest sale since January 1. This video is being filmed middle of March. Not sure when you guys are going to see this. I'm working on a lot of content right now, so that I have a little bit of backlog. But right now, on March 10th, the highest sale for the year for Shohei Ohtani, $225,000. It's a lot of money. Salvador Perez, $1,195. Jose Ramirez, $3,300. Mookie Betts, $62,000. And surprisingly, Colton Cowser at $49,400. Now, Colton Cowser's was his MLB debut patch, but his next lowest one was like in the 20,000 range. So he still has a lot of big value that's going towards him, despite the fact that he's not as relevant, that he doesn't have as much volume, that he's not the best player on his team, etc. And that goes to show the role of hype. So the final one that we're going to look at is overall demand. And that's how much demand is there for this player's card? Obviously, we have the people that think that they are going to be able to sell the card by listing it, but how many of these players' cards are actually selling? This is influenced by things such as scarcity. To that point, if a player is really popular, but they're a rookie, their cards are more scarce than, say, Shohei Ohtani. Is there a collector base? Guy like Salvador Perez has a solid collector base. Probably more people actually actively collect Salvador Perez compared to Colton Cowser, but there's also then that scarcity, the hype, etc. Current MLB performance, if a player plays well, there's more likelihood that people are going to want to collect them. And again, are they likable? So back to our examples here. Shohei Ohtani, in the last 90 days on eBay, 130,000 sales. That speaks for itself. Salvador Perez, 6,100 sales. Jose Ramirez, 10,000 sales. Mookie Betts, 23,000 sales. And Colton Cowser, 10,000 sales. So from a liquidity, from a just pure perspective of volume and demand, Colton Cowser matches Jose Ramirez. Think about that. He has a significantly higher sale in terms of market ceiling. He has just as many sales, yet he's nowhere near as good as Jose Ramirez and has way less of a track record. And that's just the hobby for you. So that was my general breakdown. Let me give you guys some closing thoughts here, though. So overall, it is very interesting in terms of what I talked about, that you have guys like Colton Cowser, who I would argue are pretty similar from a liquidity perspective to a guy like Jose Ramirez, who is a MVP caliber player. And that's just sometimes how the hobby goes. Recognizing the factors and the importance of liquidity is really, really important when you're thinking about buying inventory, what players you're buying. There's a lot more to getting inventory and getting things that are going to move for you than just getting stuff at a good price. Getting stuff that will also sell is incredibly important. It's something that you need to be paying more attention to, in my opinion, when trying to build you and your sports card business. So I hope this was helpful. I can do more topics in terms of things like this. If you guys would be interested in that, let me know down in those comments. As always, I appreciate you guys checking out the video. Catch you in the next one.